Good afternoon. This is Noreen I just changed the name of my podcast to the Noreen with Ayurveda podcast, formerly the Healthy Peaceful podcast. And today I have a wonderful guest, John Broome, who is going to share his journey with his new book that's just come out about Ayurvedic cooking. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Noreen.
Awesome. So tell me, this book was just unveiled this week. Is that correct? The electronic version on Amazon?
Yes, the Kindle version's out now. The printed version will be out in about 2 or 3 days.
Awesome. Well, before we jump right into this book, which I do want to spend some time on, no doubt.
Yeah.
I'd like to just ask you a little bit about how you came to be interested in Ayurveda, why it's important to you. I know you're also developing some product as well, food products, and why you have chosen to manifest Ayurveda in this way. So a little bit about your background, first of all. I know you live in Fairfield, Iowa.
Right. I'm an Englishman who learned about Ayurveda about 35 years ago, and I've been inspired by it. I've had other business experience. I was a director of a production engineering company in Skelmersdale for 7 or 8 years, but I had the opportunity to follow a different path, and I chose Ayurveda and about ways for people to be healthy through education, because it's very apparent that people are often not in balance or end up being vulnerable and then ill through lack of education. So the way to get people's attention on that regard is with something that tastes delicious, because as soon as somebody tries something that tastes delicious, they're going to want to buy it, and they're going to want to buy it again and again and again. And once they've bought it, they're going to be interested in how it tastes so good. And that's where education comes in. I also identified a massive...
Well, I actually love that, because what you're saying is the way that you've chosen to educate people around health and Ayurveda is through the food, through the Ayurvedic foods.
Yes.
And with the food, they will become inspired. And the hope is that they will become more curious and they want to know more about Ayurveda and what is this science of health and healing, and that it's not droll, it's not dull, it's exciting and it's inspiring, and it can be delicious.
Yes.
So I really love that. Yeah. So
what happens is, we had nutritional bars for the 3 main Ayurvedic mind-body types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Now,
you said you created Ayurvedic bars in England or here in the US?
In England, and for a few, we exported to America for a small...
And actually, for our viewers and listeners who don't know what those mind-body types are, they're Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And really, that's the mind-body constitution. And everybody's composed of different aspects of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. You're not just one, but many times you're predominantly one or two. So Ayurveda is very personalized. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And that's why you have these different food, these categories, and you've developed different products for the mind-body type. So tell us about these products.
Well, they're currently not available. We had nutritional bars and superfood powder mixes. Now, we're not selling those today, and we're not selling those for a while, because the company needed to relaunch post-COVID.
Okay.
COVID had its own issues. So the opportunity was to write a cookbook without those products in it. So
I see.
What that all supports the education element, and the principles in the cookbook are that it's very simple and very easy to cook. And
Do you have a copy of the cookbook with you? Hold
do-
it up for our viewers and listeners. The title of the cookbook by John Broome, just released this week, is Better Health Through Taste, Easy Transformation with Ayurveda, the cookbook. Wonderful photos, wonderful cover. I love it.
Thank you.
So, so tell me, there's lots of cookbooks out there. There's even lots of Ayurveda cookbooks. What's unique about your Ayurveda cookbook?
Okay, a very good question. The answer is that the introduction to Ayurveda is extremely short. And on page 4 of that introduction is a mind-body type questionnaire that takes less than a minute to fill in.
Okay.
I've filled this in with over 2,000 people. And once you discover your type, which if you score 6 Vata, 3 Pitta, 1 Kapha, then you would be a Vata Pitta type. And the important component of that is that you balance your predominant type. Only 1 in 1,000 people is pure Vata, which are very thin people. Most are a mix of 2, but you balance your predominant type.
Right. So you have a questionnaire in the cookbook that, and people can look at questionnaires online as well, but you have it right in the book.
Yep.
So it's easy, and it looks like it's super simple. It's not a 3-page questionnaire, it's half a page. And as a result, people can get some idea of what their predominant mind-body type is.
Yes.
And then you're introducing recipes that help balance that mind-body type. Is that what you're doing?
Well, what we're doing is, to make it as simple as possible, I've created 3 spice mixes.
Okay.
And the spice mixes for Vata have, for example, cinnamon and coriander and cardamom and cumin. And
so yeah, tell me a little bit about, now Vata is Vata dosha, the Vata mind body type tends to be cold, tends to be fast moving, quick moving, tends to be dry. So these spices are going to be warming. They're going to be introduce the opposite qualities. Would that be correct for the Vata?
So to give you a summary of a Vata types tend to be thinner, with bony limbs and fine dry skin. Their hands and feet are often cold and dry.
Sure.
They like sweet, sour, and salty foods. They are often restless, and they enjoy, they like a longer sleep than others. Okay. So they're often enthusiastic and lively. Now, the spices in the Vata mix, some of them are for all-rounders. So some of these spices balance all 3 Vata.
And they're also going to help with the digestive fire as well.
Yes.
Would that be correct?
That is correct. Okay. And so some of them are meant to be all-rounders, and some of them are specifically good for Vata, and it's all to do with proportion.
Right, right.
So you've got, in one example, cinnamon is available in all 3, but in the Vata one, it's much more than in the Pitta and the Kapha.
Right, I see.
And cumin is in all 3.
Well, that's an important concept, because many times people will say, well, I don't want to use cumin for Pitta because it could be heating. But what you're indicating is that many of these spices really are tridoshic. They can be used for each of the mind-body types, but the proportions are important.
Exactly.
That if you're a Pitta, you may use cumin, but you are going to probably use a little bit of less cumin.
Exactly.
Okay. And especially in the summertime, in the Pitta season. So your spice mixes, do you have recipes for those, or is this something that you're creating?
They're in the book.
Oh, that's awesome. So people can create these. and make it super simple that they can just have these spice mixes and use them in many of the recipes?
Yeah, they can put them in a bottle and have them on the table if they want to. Some people like to add a bit more when they're eating.
Sure.
But also in about 8 to 10 weeks, I'm planning to launch them in a jar.
You're going to be marketing these where it's going to, Americans like easy. So most Americans don't want to make spice mixes.
Well, you buy it from the
So you're going to be offering those pre-made spice mixes as well.
Yes. Now, there's one other thing it's worth mentioning here, that these are inspired by Maharishi Ayurveda churnas,
Sure.
which have been around for a very long time.
Yep.
However, the churnas are not designed to be used in a cooked item. I put them in cakes, for example, and the churnas have salt and sugar in them.
I see.
For some people and for some dishes, you don't put salt in rice pudding.
Right.
And you don't put sugar in certain dishes. So
yeah.
Spice mixes don't have salt and sugar in.
Okay, so you make a good point. There's some high quality spice mixes, Ayurvedic spice mixes out there, including the spice mixes, the churnas they're called, which churna just means a mixture of spices. By Maharishi Products, mappy.com. But yours are slightly different. And they may be appealing to people who are health conscious or want to control the amount of salt or sugar.
Yeah, and like I said, for some dishes, it's not appropriate to put salt in it, like rice pudding or some cakes. So, and also, I don't have all the same ingredients as the churnas.
It's not an exact replica is what you're indicating.
Some ingredients I use that they don't use.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Right. Awesome. So you have your spice mixes, your churnas. What else is unique about this book? How is it organized?
Well, the main, I wouldn't say this is unique, but the aim is that it's simple and easy.
Okay, simple and easy. Well, that's important because lots of cookbooks are not simple and they're not easy, especially Ayurveda cookbooks.
And the aim is for them to be quick. For example, I've made a meal with rice, paneer, which is cheese,
fresh cheese,
right, and vegetables with spices and the spice mix, all cooked and available to eat in 35 minutes.
Okay, all right. Well, that's really important because there's a couple of reasons why that's super important for Ayurveda. I think the first one is that Ayurveda really encourages us to eat fresh food at every meal.
Yes.
Freshly prepared. That's challenging for most Americans, most people around the globe, actually. But if you have these spice churnas and you've got simple recipes and you're looking at, 35 minutes, that's very doable.
And a soup in 20 or 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay. And are you using Instant Pots for 15 or 20 minute soup?
No, you boil them in a pan. You can use an Instant Pot.
Sure.
You can do a soup in 20 minutes.
Awesome.
One element of that is you chop the vegetables into small pieces and boil them. And another component of the method is that you boil the vegetables and whatever else you need to cook, like quinoa or lentils, and then you fry the spices in a little bit of ghee to enrich the flavor and often and then you add those to the vegetables after they've been cooked, so that you've got a much more fresh and stimulating experience with the tastes. Because if you put the spices in 30 minutes of cooking, they have often had some of their freshness.
They're feeling less potent, in other words.
Yes. So that's a simple method. You mix them up and you blend. You can blend a third of them to give it a bit more of a nicer consistency. And all of that method is in the book.
Yep. And tell me, you've been specifically, how have you organized the book? Is it by season? Is it by dosha? Is it by type of food? So how is it organized?
It's organized with by meal, and there's some sort of snack elements to it. So
Okay, so it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack.
And in breakfast, it refers to 3 spreads, and the almond spread is ground almonds, almond butter, sorry, with the vata spice mix, bit of coconut sugar and salt, and you can put them in a big jar like peanut butter or cashew nut butter.
Sure. And then you can spread that on your toast or
Morning,
yeah. So it's a lot of things that you can prepare and then have in advance to, like the churnas or the spreads, to really enhance your cooking.
Yeah, we'll call them vata pitta kapha spice mixes because it differentiates them from a churna.
Sure. That's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Good. Excellent. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the book in terms of big picture? Because I'd like to ask you about some specific recipes.
Okay, the big picture is it's not vegetarian. Okay. We have fish, tuna and salmon, chicken, and omelets.
Okay.
We don't have red meat because red meat is far harder to digest. Mm-hmm. And we're not saying people shouldn't eat red meat if they want to eat red meat. If they want to eat red meat, they should eat red meat. But from an Ayurveda perspective, it's harder to digest, and this is not what we're about. Okay,
so you chose to leave that out.
But chicken is very easy, and we
okay.
Chicken dish.
So it's not a vegetarian cookbook, but it has a very large emphasis on plant-based food. Would that be safe to say?
Yes, and we do have eggs, but it's important to have the 9 essential amino acids and enough protein. So
yes,
we do have that. Lentils have a lot of protein, and so do eggs, and so does rice and dal.
Okay.
So we've got protein. We're aware of the importance of protein.
Of course, yes. So other kind of takeaways, we have the simple, we have the easy, we have the spice mixes and spreads.
All 6
It's not vegetarian.
No. When you have a meal, not necessarily every meal, but in this case, we do it in nearly every meal, all 6 tastes are available. And what Ayurveda says is that if you don't experience all 6 tastes, sweet, sour, bitter, astringent, pungent, and salty, apples are astringent, hot, spicy foods are pungent. Even for a pitta type who doesn't normally want spicy food, it's important to experience all 6 tastes, because if you don't, the physiology will be seeking that taste. And even when you're full, it will want to eat more, even when it's full, because it's looking for that taste. And there is, it is perceived that this is possibly one of the reasons why America has such a high obesity, because their diet is often devoid of pungent and astringent tastes.
Well, that's an excellent point that you make, that Americans, there's 2 predominant tastes, salty and sweet, that Americans crave, and the only time they get bitter is with coffee. But the reality is that this is really the beautiful part of Ayurveda, is when we introduce all 6 tastes and we introduce a balanced meal, the likelihood of cravings and overeating or snacking is significantly less.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I think I'd like to shift into, if you talk a little bit, pick your favorite recipe in the breakfast section.
My favorite recipe.
Or something you want to share with the audience.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to share with the audience is a wrap.
Okay.
And a wrap is basically a really simple way to have a very satisfying meal with very little effort. And if you look at the front cover, there,
Sure.
that's what I'm referring to when I say a wrap.
Okay. So could they use a tortilla or anything whatsoever?
Tortilla, yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Oh, we call it a wrap. Now, the Pita Wrap with vegetables and avocado is grated zucchini and carrots and finely chopped asparagus, because you can't really grate an asparagus.
Yeah.
And then they're boiled with a bit of water, and you add the asparagus at the appropriate time so that it's ready when the grated vegetables are done as well. And then in step 2, it's laid out very cleanly. You have avocado chopped finely, coconut milk, fresh cilantro, salt, ghee, I'll mention ghee in a minute, lime juice, and the Pita mix. And you can do all that with a wrap that you put in the oven for 3 or 4 minutes to warm up and spread some ghee on. And then you have a really tasty meal with all 6 tastes in 20 minutes maximum. I've done it in 15. And you make enough vegetables for 6 or 7 wraps, and you can serve 2 or 3 people. And if you have a Vata type as well, you simply do everything else the same, except you put some of the Vata mix in, and you might use one in vegetable differently, but you don't have to, because so many vegetables, including asparagus, are good for all 3 doshas.
Awesome. That sounds delicious.
If you've got an ingredient like a cabbage, say, that might not be ideal for Vata and Pitta, if you've only got a little bit in it and you've got the right mix, it doesn't matter, because it's about the overall taste.
Yeah, if you're not, and then if you have cabbage and you've sautéed it, or even if it's a water saute, you've it's no longer hard, rough, and difficult to digest.
Yes, exactly. You can change it with what you cook.
Right.
The only one that might surprise people with is the kapha wrap, because in this case you dry stir fry it, because kapha is cold and wet by nature, and it doesn't like so much moisture. So you dry stir fry, and you put the kapha spice mix, or there's another spice mix called the hot kapha mix, and so that's great for kaphas. And
right. So you're saying that now, when you say dry saute, essentially the vegetables are going on the pan without any oil or ghee and without any liquid.
Correct. Now,
but you're including the spice mix
at the end
with them.
Yes.
At the end.
Sorry, they're dry stir fried.
Right.
Yes. But in the total recipe, there is a little bit of ghee. Just use less, or you could sometimes use sunflower oil if you wanted to. But
right. Okay.
Ghee isn't always bad for kapha, just a lot less than Vata and Pitta.
Sure. And I think what you're saying is the inherent qualities of kapha, the kapha mind body type, tends to be more cold or cool, and can be wet or damp.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, you want to introduce the opposite qualities.
Yes.
Kind of dry and heating.
Yes.
Okay.
Now
it's not as though kapha doesn't like those qualities. It means that those qualities aren't the same qualities of kapha we don't want to introduce in foods and exacerbate any imbalance.
Yes, there's 2 other points to mention here.
Sure.
This is one of the differentiating factors, actually.
Sure.
There are some, kapha has a preference for hot, bitter, astringent, and pungent tastes.
Okay.
However, as I've mentioned before, only 1 in 1,000 people, in my experience and others that I've discussed this with, are pure kapha.
Right, right.
As such, they have a secondary dosha, and in my
Mhm.
experience, that is always pitta.
Yeah.
I've come across
Okay.
kapha vata. So what that means is that they're predominantly kapha, but there's some pitta there as well. So they might like a little bit of something sweet as well. And my experience is that a kapha type will definitely like some chilies and some heat, but they're not averse to a rice pudding or anything like that.
But
Because
that's not necessarily the best thing for them, correct?
no, because when they all need six tastes, as you know,
Right, right.
and if you're a kapha pitta, you're going to want something a little sweet, just a little.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
And rice is rich in protein. Now,
Right.
in the cookbook, we recommend almond milk for kapha. So you
Okay,
can
okay.
rice pudding with almond milk,
Sure.
because almond milk is a little bit heating.
Right. So you have a recipe in there for rice pudding with almond milk.
I have 5 recipes for rice pudding.
Okay.
One of them is without sugar. We use
Right.
blended dates and or raisins instead of
Right.
sugar, because
Okay.
some people are, it's good sometimes to have less sugar. We can cover that a
Or
little.
more, they want to have more natural sweeteners.
Yeah.
They're moving away from cane sugar.
Yes,
Or they may have certain health conditions that
exactly.
prevent them from using that.
I don't use cane sugar, I use coconut sugar.
Okay.
And the other point we haven't mentioned, we've covered ghee. Does everybody know what ghee is? Clarified butter?
I think most people know that. Why don't you, for the audience, just explain how ghee is different than butter?
Yeah, butter has fats in, ghee solids in. Ghee is clarified butter, and to make it, you put ghee in a pan or in the oven, heat it up just a little bit on a very low heat, and all the solids rise up to the surface, and you can scoop them off. And what you're left with is pure ghee, which is very nutritious, and it aids the digestive process.
Right. So you really changed with the method of preparation. You've changed the character entirely of the butter.
Yes, you have.
That you don't have the dairy. You don't have the dairy. The solid fats that the dairy fats.
No solid fats.
Sure.
And you can make it at home, or you can buy it in many supermarkets.
Right. So many people who are dairy intolerant can do very well with ghee.
A lot can, yes. It's
Sure.
got no lactose in it.
Right. Yeah.
But for people who are vegetarians or vegans, they can use sunflower oil or olive oil.
Okay. Yeah.
But ghee.
So tell me how you like to use ghee.
Well,
why you think it's important, and maybe an example from the cookbook.
Well, my experience with ghee is that it's extremely good for the digestive system. It helps the assimilation of the nutrients, and it helps the flow of the food through the body. It's very, very well used in India, and all I can say is that it's very good for elimination. If anybody has a problem with elimination, ghee can be good for that as well. So in the recipe book, we put the ghee in a frying pan and we warm it up a little bit. Then we add the spices, and in some cases the cilantro at that point. Sometimes we add the cilantro first and boil it up in a very small amount of water. And we then put the spices in, and then we add the spices already mixed and with the enhanced flavors into the already cooked vegetables with the right amount of water left. Then we keep them warm for another 3 or 4 minutes, and then often we will blend a third of the vegetables or a half or in some cases, all of them for a soup, to give a good consistency to the meal. And it all relates to an enjoyable experience, and that's including all 6 tastes in the dish.
Yeah, no, that you bring up a good point that there is that element of bliss with food. So you talked about an enjoyable experience. From an Ayurvedic perspective, could you describe an enjoyable experience with a meal?
Well, it's basically...
And from your point of view.
Okay, it's basically 2 components. The first component is all 6 tastes. Even a tiny little bit of sour with some lime juice will give the experience of that at a subtle level, and that's satisfying. And the other is that overall, the predominant flavors are suited to the mind-body type. And one example of how that can be done in a family dinner with some vata and some pitta is you prepare everything and then you divide the dish into 2, and then add the spice mix with the cilantro and so on for vatas to their one, and the spice mix with the cilantro or whatever for the pittas to the other one. And then each group gets what they like, and the cook hasn't had to work so hard.
Well, that's important. That's important. So that solves a conundrum. How do you feed a family when you're not going to make 6 different meals or a meal for every dosha? It's just you really use those spice mixes and accommodate people with those spice mixes.
Yes, exactly. And
Awesome.
I've done that once with vata, pitta, and kapha. There was one kapha. So the vatas had one of those wraps. I said there's a wrap. We do one wrap with tuna in, and the vata person was a fan of tuna as well, so they got the tuna one. And then the pitta's got more the pitta one without any fish or meat, and the kapha got the very hot and spicy version, but with the same vegetables, and everyone was happy.
So it's just really slight differences that you're accommodating for, and but keeping it simple.
Yeah, you can't always do all 3 meals with the same vegetables for vata, pitta, and kapha, but you can. In this case, I did manage to do that. But I wanted to mention something else.
Sure. There
are 2 spice mixes for kapha. Now, I've met kapha people, and we have one kapha spice mix is the main one, which is ginger, cumin, coriander, turmeric, and cinnamon and black pepper. But I also do a hot kapha spice mix. Now, that has cayenne pepper and paprika and mustard seed and cumin seed.
That sounds good.
That's really hot. Now,
right.
If the recipe says 1-2 teaspoons and it's a little bit too hot for you on the cayenne pepper version, you can just put 1 in.
Right.
But the idea is that some people really do want a very hot meal, and we provide that.
Okay, so you have the kind of the original kapha, and then you've got the kapha plus. And maybe that particular kapha is able to handle those hot spices, and I mean it is balancing for kapha. It's whether or not you're going to imbalance the pitta. So, but you can reduce the hot spices. It does help with kapha because kapha needs to be stimulated.
Yes.
And certainly kapha's digestion tends to be slower.
Yes.
And can be sluggish. So that's very helpful. Awesome. Well, do you have a favorite dinner recipe that you'd like to share?
Well, we have what's called complete meals. At the end of the book, there are 6 complete meals, and there's 2 Vata, 2 Pitta, and 2 Kapha. So one example would be, I'll give you the Vata one. The Vata one, a Vata one, is a Vata nut roast with quinoa and walnuts, ketchup with cilantro and cumin seeds, roast potatoes in ghee with rosemary, and Vata mango chutney. And then
Sounds delicious.
For dessert, it's a date and walnut cake with a little bit of extra heat in it, because Vata's like a little bit of heat.
Right.
And one which will not be considered very usual is a Kapha cake. I've done a Kapha cake with apricots and no sugar, because apricots are good for Kapha. So it's not sweet, but it's got ginger and apricot, and it's quite popular with Kaphas.
It sounds delicious, ginger and apricot, no doubt. So beautiful, beautiful. Well, those are wonderful examples. And now, John, I'd like to ask you about your own meals. Usually the cook, it's sort of like the shoemaker doesn't necessarily take care of his own shoes, that sort of thing. But tell me about what, if you weren't cooking for anyone else and just cooking for yourself, tell me what your typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner would look like from an Ayurvedic perspective.
Well, it's interesting what you say, but I can assure you that I am 99%, I make what's in the recipe book. So for
beautiful. So this is you're definitely practicing what you preach here.
Oh yeah, for breakfast.
Or you're preaching what you practice.
One of the two, or even both. What I do for breakfast is stewed apple with almond, with coconut milk, desiccated coconut, raisins, lime juice, salt, and a bit of ghee. That's all 6 tastes. It's really quick. Well, it can sometimes. You stew the apple on its own first, and you cut it finely. Then you add the coconut milk, which is in a tin. It's not all liquid. Some bits of it are solid.
Sure.
Then you add desiccated coconut, raisins, and it's good to soak raisins if you put them in a cake or something. But in this breakfast, you can put the raisins in at the very beginning, and they'll be okay.
You cook them with the apples.
Yeah, and then add the spice mix, the Pitta spice mix, lime juice, and a bit of salt. The importance of salt is, for breakfast for me, I need to have some salt to get all 6 tastes in a breakfast, and I'd rather have that at the beginning of the day than have to wait till lunchtime.
Sure. Well, salt also is very energizing as well.
Okay, and it's good to enhance the flavors as well. Now,
sure.
The other thing is that because it's stewed apple, normally Ayurveda doesn't recommend having apples after breakfast because they're lighter, and you can create problems with digestion if you have apple at lunchtime that's not cooked. But with stewed apple, you can have that for a dessert as well. But
so what you're indicating is that just merely naming a food from an Ayurvedic perspective doesn't necessarily, the properties of that food don't necessarily, it's not like a one-for-one thing, like it's an apple and an apple has these properties. It all depends on how the apple is prepared.
Yes, it's different.
So a cooked apple is going to have different properties and be balancing for certain doshas versus a raw apple. Just like raw ginger versus powdered ginger, they have very different properties.
Yeah, it's not so much like that. What it is a stewed apple is far easier to digest.
Sure.
And you can have it as a dessert at lunchtime because it's stewed. And
of course, yeah.
It's far easier to digest, and it won't interfere with the main meal, which if you had a raw apple,
right,
as a dessert, it would start to cause problems.
Yeah. Well, you also bring up the point about it's also the tastes are shifted as well. Like a stewed apple is very sweet,
Sweeter.
versus a raw apple is astringent.
Yes, more exactly.
Yeah, it's not so interesting. So
And
how about
also,
lunch?
there's no sugar added to that meal because there's sugars in raisins.
Yes.
So it's fruit sugars rather than cane sugar.
Right. Well, it sounds delicious.
And now for lunch, what
Yeah. What's your, I know it's going to vary day to day, but if left to your own devices, what's your go-to?
okay. So the go-to on lunch is
Am I going to guess a wrap?
no. You know the wrap. I mentioned the wrap.
Yes.
Well, the wrap has grated zucchini and carrots.
That sounds good.
Cooks quick.
And you cook those.
Right. But in the lunchtime version, I have chopped vegetables, not grated.
Okay.
They take a bit longer to cook, but I still have avocado. And on some instances, often I will remove the salt from step 2 and add a bouillon cube, stock cube,
Okay.
with the Pita spice mix, a tiny little bit less. So a tiny little bit less, but nonetheless, instead of.
But you enhance the flavor with the bouillon cube
as well. So that's an all-rounder general thing. But it's 2 tablespoons of Pita mix instead of 3.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it also sounds like, when you have a recipe is a starting point, and then the individual, the cook, needs to like play with it, have some fun with it, reduce the amount of spice if it feels too heavily spiced.
Exactly.
They don't have to be so rigid with it.
Exactly. Some people in a meal will want 3 tablespoons of spice mix.
Right.
And other people at the same meal with the same type, it might be a Pita type.
Sure.
Want less spice mix.
Yeah.
Because they're sensitive to spices. It's slightly more than the other. And in the same way, some people prefer a bit more ghee, some people a bit less ghee.
Sure. So it's just getting in tune with your own body and adjusting and really just zeroing in on how you feel afterwards. That's the as they say, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
And your dinner, your go-to dinner if left on your own.
Okay. Before I go on to the go-to dinner, I just want to mention, we often say on an ingredient, or to taste. So lime juice, you just put it in what you want because different people have different tastes. So my go-to supper is a
soup. I actually talk about lime juice because I know other Ayurvedic chefs like to use lime juice because it's not as heating as lemon.
So we use lime for Pitta and Kapha and lemon for Vata.
For Vata, okay. Okay, cool. All right, wonderful.
I've got that. My experience with Kaphas is, I mean, obviously, whatever they like works, but if you remember, most secondary doshas for Kaphas is Pitta.
Are Pitta, so it might be too heating, the lemon.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, especially in summertime.
Exactly. Yes.
So your go-to dinner.
My go-to dinner is a soup with toast and something yummy for dessert. One of my popular desserts.
Yes.
This is supper time as well. Is stewed fig and raisin blended with custard, or very rarely, but sometimes with cream, but very rarely.
And how are you making your custard? Is that a typical custard with egg and dairy?
No, it's cornstarch, milk.
You could use instead of cornstarch, you could use kuzu if you wanted a more natural thickener, or arrowroot.
Yeah.
So you could substitute out cornstarch for you could use kuzu or arrowroot.
You could. Anything that will do that. And
sure.
What I add is vanilla essence and cardamom and nutmeg 4-to-1. So 4 parts cardamom, 1 part fresh ground nutmeg.
Okay.
That's in the recipe as well.
That sounds delicious. And of course, the nutmeg at night is going to be relaxing because it has a sedative effect.
Yes. And
so it's going to, it's going to kind of bring you kind of into the evening mode. So that's really good.
Good.
Is there a reason why you like the dessert in the evening? I mean, I like thinking of a dessert in the evening, but lots of times I don't have it. Right. But maybe it's a good, maybe dessert for dinner is the best thing to do in the evening.
Well, what was I say? I also, just to come back to that, I do add a little bit of coconut sugar for the custard. Now, the dessert for the evening, I've often had stewed apple, and why they're all ingredients or some of them, but I need something sweet. Otherwise, my mind's going, where's the sweet thing? Where's the sweet thing? And the same 6 tastes. I know Ayurveda says it's good to have all 6 tastes in a day, but I prefer all 6 tastes in a meal.
Right. Okay. All right. So you like to, sometimes you might have stewed apples twice a day.
Yeah. Or I can have a little bit of cake. There are 6 cakes in this recipe book. You can have a tiny bit of cake. And now it's not so heavy.
Well, the English like cake, don't they?
They do like cake.
I think Americans are less enamored of cake. And Americans don't necessarily appreciate a beautiful cake because I think the English cakes tend to be a little more dense. Would that be fair to say?
Well, it all depends what cake you're having, but I'll give you an example of a cake because the flour for kaffas I use millet flour because millet flour kaffa.
Millet is drying.
Yeah.
So that's probably very good for kapha.
Yeah. And for I like rice flour because it's gluten-free as well.
Okay, so you have some gluten-free recipes that you've included as well.
Yes. There was someone in the industry in England in the food production industry who explained to me that modern wheats have often been refined for yield, and
the GMO and the hybridization, there's no doubt.
And the amount of gluten in more modern wheats is much higher than in older wheats, and in England specifically, and I think it's all over the world, that gluten intolerances have grown. The number of people with gluten intolerances have grown over the years.
Right. Okay.
But the view is that it's partly because there's more gluten in the food than we.
Yeah, no doubt. And also the quality of the wheat is just not what it was. There's no doubt. Yeah. I want to shift a little bit, and I want to shift to. You said you're in Mexico.
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing with listeners and viewers what your typical, what you do in terms of your own breakfast, lunch, dinner from an Ayurvedic perspective. So I was curious about that. And it's always interesting to hear, but you're in Mexico currently. And I know you were in Fairfield earlier this week because you gave a presentation at the library about your book.
Yep.
And I asked you, what are you doing in Mexico? So let me ask that question again. What are you doing in Mexico?
I'm in Mexico to create a version of the book, Easy Transformation, Better Health Through Taste, Easy Transformation with Ayurveda, the Mexican cookbook. And it's going to be...
first of all, I absolutely love this. Are you going to, before I get into actually the Mexican version, are you going to do this in every country?
No. But I'm going to come up with maybe 20 or 30 Mexican dishes using what's familiar here, and the same spice mixes, and I'm going to test them out. And there are going to be some dishes that are very similar, but with a little bit more, maybe garlic and a few other things. There's a lot of garlic here, but there's going to be more. What do they? They use a lot more beans. They use a lot of beans.
Yes, so, pinto beans, black beans.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's really wonderful. I'm wondering if these the spices that your spice mixes have a lot of what we traditionally think about as Indian spices. So I'm wondering how these are going to work in Mexico, or you're going to have to tweak them somewhat.
No, I'm not going to tweak them because they are in England. These are all common spices. In America, they're all common spices.
Sure.
Cumin, ginger. Turmeric.
Well, cumin is a big Mexican spice, so that's no problem.
Yes, you see, we've got.
I'm not sure about ginger because it's so hot there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, remember, ginger has a warming quality, but if you don't put a lot in, it's right, and it also helps the assimilation of food.
Right. It helps the digestion, there's no doubt.
Exactly.
So what is your purpose in introducing the Mexican version?
Well, this Mexican version is to increase the spread of the book and the understanding of Ayurveda. And ultimately, the other food products, the bars and the spreads, which have different ingredients in them, and are not related to the spice mixes which are added to meals, are part of the bigger picture for selling in different places in the world, in Mexico.
Right. Okay, that's cool. So you said you're going to be in Mexico for a month. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So in that month, what's your game plan? You have a lot to do. Do you have somebody you're collaborating with there? On the food aspect, or what's your game plan?
Well, the game plan is that I need willing victims to try the food and tell me what they think.
I'm sure you'll find lots of that.
And I already have this where I'm staying. There are not all here, but connected friends and relatives here. Relatives. We have one Vata Pitta type, two Pitta Vata types, and one Pitta Kapha type.
Okay.
So I've got all tastes all the people who are going to try.
Well, it would be wonderful, it would be wonderful if you could bring in a native, somebody who's born in Mexico.
No, all of those people I mentioned are born in Mexico.
Oh, okay, awesome. So they culturally they are going to tell you, hey, that's not working. That nobody in Mexico is going to be comfortable with that. Okay, cool. Yeah, because otherwise I think it would be a bit challenging.
Oh yeah.
Because everyone's always bringing, if they're a transplant into Mexico, they're bringing in their own cultural influences, no doubt. So awesome. And are you staying with friends where you have access to a kitchen?
Yes, where I'm staying, I have access to the kitchen.
Okay, awesome. Well, this would be fun to film you developing your recipes. That would be fun. Are
you making a suggestion for another booking? Do you want to Zoom me making a recipe?
Well, what we could do is at the end of your month, we can do another episode and talk about what you discovered over the last month in Mexico. We could, and I'm going to. Would you like to do that?
That would be great.
Before you have it in print, it's just kind of like what was challenging, what you really enjoyed, what you learned, what worked, what didn't work, and kind of a preview of your recipes.
That's a brilliant idea.
Okay, we'll do that.
Idea. And you need to give me a challenge. I think you should be giving me a challenge by saying, I think you need to come up with at least 10 recipes for spectacular Mexican dishes. You know, give me.
Well, I think 10's reasonable. It's there.
Yeah.
You've got it. You want a challenge? I'm giving you a challenge. I'd like 10 recipes.
I'm going to try and do 20, but it's good to have a target as well, don't you think?
Yeah. So let's we'll schedule it once we sign off. We'll schedule it, and you'll have it. I never like the word deadline, but you have a due date, and you can report back. So awesome.
Brilliant.
I want to move into, we're getting toward the end here, but I want to just ask you about these bars and these products and these spice mixes and how you, my understanding is you had a company, but you're in the process of developing another company where you want to market these products.
Yes. You want me
and you also have powder, you also have protein powders or?
No, do you want to explain about that?
Yeah, just a little bit.
So a long time ago, well, a few years ago, I developed 3 superfood powders, which are not spice mixes. They are balancing for Vata, Pitta, and Kapha with an English Ayurvedic doctor. And for instance, the Vata one had coconut sugar, cinnamon, and Brahmi, Arjuna, and Ashwagandha, and Shatavari, and so on. So
you were including Ayurvedic herbs.
Yes, including Ayurvedic herbs. And the Pitta had a lot of fennel, and it also had Brahmi and Arjuna. Some of them are all rounders. The Kapha one had no sugar. It was very spicy. I sold them into about 90 health food stores in England. But as soon as the idea came up for those spice mixes by my business partner at the time, I said, we need to have those in lots of other products. And in the subsequent 3 years, I developed nutritional bars, which we sold about 40,000 of in England.
So you wanted to take this superfood powder and not only incorporate it in a protein drink or a superfood drink, but in other products as well.
Yes, and it wasn't it's not a protein powder, but I managed to get it in 10 products that I developed, but only 2 that were manufactured. But the protein cookies were really popular. It took a year to develop and refine those in a kitchen in America with staff. And we are going to be selling those in America, hopefully next year. We will be doing it through franchising in California, where someone will buy.
Well, before I actually want to just stay away from the business structure and talk more about the products that you hope to introduce to the US.
Sure. So we've got protein cookies, which are delicious. They've got rice flour and pumpkin seed flour powder. Okay.
And are you incorporating Ayurvedic spices, Ayurvedic herbs, both, or?
They have what I've mentioned before, which is the superfood powders in.
Okay, all of these products have the superfood powder.
Yes, they have the sugar-free version, which has still got the Brahmi and Arjuna and Ashwagandha and Moringa.
Okay, so protein cookies, and what else?
We have spreads you put on your toast.
Right.
With the superfood powders in. We actually have chocolate-coated bars and chocolate bars. Now, Ayurveda considers chocolate to be slightly problematic for influencing the ability to digest properly. But
I think Ayurveda says that it says that chocolate clogs the channels. That's what I've heard. But I haven't really investigated that fully.
But I think the point is that if you really like chocolate and you don't have much, that's about quantity, I think.
Yeah.
Because they have all 6 tastes in, and they've got those potent spices and herbs, it gives them a far richer taste.
Sure. And maybe those things are going to be balancing to what's problematic about the chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And they
sure.
don't have those nourishing qualities which will help.
Right.
Also produced an oatmeal bars, Vata Pitta Kapha.
Okay.
And in England, we call it date square. In America, the date slice. In Canada, they call it date square. It's a layer of oats, and then a layer of dates, and then another layer of oats. And it's got a short shelf life, so it'll be last about 3 or 4 weeks. But it's got the Kapha one uses apricots, the
Right.
Pitta one uses raisins, and the Vata
Sure.
one uses dates.
Okay. So you've got these food products, and we would definitely in the US we would call that probably a date bar, or a bar cookie. But it sounds like you've got cookies, you've got spreads, and you've got bars that they will soon be unveiled, those products.
Well, we are planning to launch 3 of them next year,
Okay.
and towards the end of the year, a couple more, and we'll start with America.
Awesome. Awesome.
And
Well,
also,
John,
can I just mention one other thing?
sure. Yeah.
The people who are doing the selling, are going to be licensing in America.
Sure.
They will be Ayurvedic ambassadors. They will learn about Ayurveda. We'll give them further courses to do, further booklets.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will understand a little bit more in more detail, so that if anyone asks a question when they're doing an in-store sampling session, they'll have all the answers. And so education is a major differentiator.
Okay, so that's how you view how your products are going to be. You're going to distinguish your products from perhaps other Ayurvedic food products that are on the market.
Yes, because 49 out of 50 people that buy a $3 nutritional bar will not know what Ayurveda is. They won't even know what Vata means. They'll buy it because it says cinnamon and almond.
Well, I think what you're indicating is that this is an opportunity to just increase awareness about Ayurveda and the way that you're doing it. And thank you so much. And it's absolutely wonderful. You're doing it through the food. So that's much required. There's no doubt. So awesome. Well, I definitely want to follow up with you and talk about your trip in Mexico, and just how your Ayurvedic journey in Mexico. Well, that's what we'll name it. So, well, this has really been wonderful, John. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And before we conclude, just state your book again at this point. Hold it up for the audience and state it again.
It's on Amazon.
It's Better Health Through Taste, Easy Transformation with Ayurveda, the Cookbook by John Broome. And John, where can people find you?
They can find this book on Amazon.
Sure. And I will include links in the show notes.
There's a website, and it's called easytransformationayurveda.com. Okay. And Easy Transformation, so people can find more information about you and what you're doing there. Yes, it's only just it's about to be put up. I'll have something there by tomorrow. Okay, so this is a new website. New website. And what's going to happen is there will be new recipes released on that website every month. Not necessarily many, but I want to do some dishes with spaghetti and some other dishes. And there'll be an ongoing way of communicating with people. Sure. People can offer suggestions, ask questions. Yeah, you can solicit feedback, which is great. Feedback. Sure. And they can even make a dish themselves, take a picture and submit it and tell them all about themselves if they want to. Wonderful. That's so great. So easytransformationayurveda.com. Yes. And your book is currently in the electronic format on sale at Amazon. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. This has been wonderful.